Hi guys, it's me, and listen, I'm sick of social media. I'm sick of social media. Every time I go onto YouTube, all I get these days are videos about politics. If it wasn't for people making James Bond videos, I would go insane. And I realize that I can do something to combat this. I too can make videos that maybe I'd want to listen to while I'm doing the washing up. That don't have anything to do with politics, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to do it about writing. I'm going to make a video today about writing, because writing is something that I'm really passionate about and I know something about. And so if you are in any way interested in writing or telling stories or anything like that, then stay tuned. You never know, you might find what I have to say interesting. Cheers. Hi guys, it's me. And yeah, as I said in that intro, I'm done. Oh, social media is driving me nuts at the moment. You know, I used to go onto YouTube and I would find videos suggested to me that were about subjects that I was interested in. So, a lot of James Bond stuff, and then maybe gun history stuff, and cooking history stuff, and car stuff, and video game stuff from like Fallout or whatever. You know, I used to have a nice series of things that I could do the wash up the dishes or cook the kids dinner or whatever and listen to, and I feel good about it going on in the background. But it seems like I'm not getting those videos suggested to me anymore. All I get is political videos all the time, and every time I listen to a political video, I don't know, it just makes me depressed or anxious or angry. So I'm like, you know what? I am going to take the algorithm head on, and I'm going to keep out making videos, and I'm going to make videos about stuff I'm passionate about, even if it's not James Bond related. What's the thing I'm most passionate about? It is writing. Yeah. And before we go any further, let's do this. So, one of the reasons I was inspired to make this video was this package that arrived. Woo! And what is in this package? Boom. Copies of one of my books. High Point. Yeah. Look at all of them. Look at all of them. Big chunky boys. This beautiful cover and stuff. Yeah. So, okay. Let's talk turkey. I'm going to talk about writing. And I'm going to make more videos about writing. I'm going to make videos about writing all the time, because, you know, that's something I'm passionate about. And if you like the videos that I make and you want to buy me a pint, metaphorically or actually, because I'm in New Jersey, and, you know, if you're ever in New Jersey and you want to buy me a pint, I might be down for that. But yeah, if you're listening to this and you're in, I don't know, Timbuktu or something, and you say, I like this bloke, I like the cut of his jib, I want to buy him a pint, you can buy me a pint by buying a copy of my book. There we go. There should be a little cool pop-up that I made that appears here. So yeah, there is a description down below. Click on that. It'll take you through to a page where you can buy a physical or a digital copy of my book and buy me a metaphorical pint. And I would be extremely grateful, because yeah, if I'm going to make videos about writing, I might as well actually talk about my writing. And this book here, High Point, is the first book that I'm offering. Go and check it out. It's great. It's out of the 31 books that I've written and published, this is my personal favorite, and I'll get into that some other time. But let's go. Writing. Yeah, I love writing. Writing is very important to me. I wanted to be a writer since I was 9 years old, and I used to hammer out stories on my mother's IBM electric typewriter. I wrote my first quote-unquote book when I was 13, and since then I've been like, yeah, I want to be a writer. And the thing is, a lot of people say, oh, I want to be a writer, or a lot of people say, I want to write a book. But it's like, I had a very specific goal and destination in my mind. I was like, I want to be a writer. And what does that mean? That means I want to write books as the thing I do as a career. And I want to be able to live a nice upper middle class life through the royalties that I get writing books. That was my goal since I was like 13. And that's the great white whale that I spent my life chasing. And it's a whale that I've caught on more than one occasion. So let's talk about that though. Yeah, I'm a writer, and I've always wanted to be a writer since I was like 9 years old. 13 wrote my first quote unquote book. I then continued writing all through my teenage years. I started getting to wanting to be a writer and going off and approaching publishers and getting rejection slip after rejection slip. And it was like one of those fever dreams. Everyone was saying, you're never going to be able to be a writer. You know, it's so difficult to get an agent and then get a publisher. And then I would hang out with actual writers um, who had, you know, book deals with major publishers like Simon and Schuster or Penguin, and they didn't make much money from it. They all had day jobs. And I'm like, no, 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 no. I want to be like a protagonist in a Stephen King novel, and I want to live in upstate New York and be a writer, and I want to write books, and I want to go and do fancy lectures. And people will be like, oh, when you wrote this book about, like, yeah, that's it. I wanted to be a writer. That's what I wanted to do as my vocation. So I wanted to be a commercially successful writer. I think I could have just said that and saved you all the trouble of listening to me. But yeah, this is something that was my vision for what being a writer is being a writer, but being somebody who writes books to the point that you get enough money from them to actually be able to live a nice life. There we go. And that wasn't happening for me back in the old days, back before the internet. You know, I would send off book synopsis and different ideas to publishers, and I'd always get a rejection slip back. And yeah, I kind of got it. You know, it's difficult. I wanted to write James Bond and the Saint type stories, and I had a character that I invented called Adventure Eddie, and I'd write stories about him, and they would be good stories. But you know what? They weren't like who would pay for them? Who would buy them? I don't know. Publishers didn't know, but as we've learned, publishers didn't know very much. Um, and I loved writing dirty stories, like dirty short stories. In fact, the first article that I ever got paid for was a dirty short story I wrote for Hustler Fantasies magazine in Beverly Hills. And I remember I was in France, and I wrote the story and I sent it off, and 4 weeks later or something, I got a letter back accepting a check from Larry Flint from Hustler Enterprises and Las Vegas, no, Los Angeles, Wilshire Avenue, Los Angeles. That's it, for $25. I still have that check. And I was like, wow, I can write dirty little short stories and people pay me money for them. So obviously I wanted to be a writer and write adventure stories and stuff like that. But I also loved writing really dirty stories. I used to write a ton of them. And then the internet happened, and I published a ton of them on an old internet forum, and people really loved them. And then Kindle happened in 2011. Amazon invented the Kindle, and they invented this thing called Kindle Direct Publishing, where anybody could upload their story and sell it on the Kindle. And I remember back in 2011, I published my first novel on the Kindle, Adventure Ready, which was the adventure story that I'd always wanted to write. Everyone, their first novel, for men especially, tends to be kind of like a semi-autobiographical wish fulfillment thing. And so I wrote a story about a chubby ginger kid who goes to Paris and spends a year there and falls in love with an American girl and has a wild adventure and ends up like all buff and cool. And then he goes off and becomes Adventure Eddie. So yeah, this is the first this book that I published in 2011, and I read it to my kids. It's not great. It's not bad. In fact, there's more to say about that specific thing, but it showed me that it could be done. And all these dirty short stories that I used to write, I started publishing those in 2013. And the thing that really got me was within a month, I was making hundreds of dollars from doing so. I was like, wow, I can write dirty short stories and sell them on Amazon and make hundreds of dollars. And it turned out I couldn't make hundreds of dollars. I could make thousands of dollars. So I wrote and self-published dirty stories on the Amazon Kindle app, and I kept doing it, and I kept doing it, and I kept doing it, and I got to a point where I was making, this is about 2014, early 2015, I was making $5,000 a month from writing dirty short stories and self-publishing them on the Amazon Kindle. And it was amazing. Like, I was like, this is crazy. I've always wanted to be a writer, and now I can write stuff and make money doing it. But $5,000 a month, it's not to be sneezed at. And I shouldn't sneeze at it, but it was an awful lot of work because you had to write an awful lot of stories, and also it was not quite where I wanted to be financially. Like, if I wanted to be a full-time writer, I needed a little bit more than that. So I was starting to get into communities of writers online and stuff. There was one community on Reddit that we had a big group together that supported each other. We were called the Heaving Breasts. We were all romance writers. Well, we were all like smutty story writers, and then we evolved into romance authors because people were like, hey, the real money is in romance books, and the real money's always been in romance books. Um, and to me, that was a really interesting experience because I was like, okay, I need to write a romance book if I'm going to make any real money. How hard can that be? Oh, my sweet summer child. That's why I'm making this video, really. I want to go back in time. Having written and published 31 books and sold 71,000 copies of my books and reached 600,000 readers on Kindle Unlimited and made over $300,000 in royalties and blah, blah, blah. All stuff I have to say to like validate myself. I wish I could go back in time to where I was when I was like, oh, it can't be that difficult to write a novel, and tell myself everything I know now. And that's kind of what I want to do with this video. Um, because, yeah, writing a novel, that's the thing. I already told you I wrote a novel and published a novel in 2011. And this video is kind of targeted towards people who are where I was then, or me if I could go back in time. It's like you think, oh, writing a novel is easy. All you have to do is think of a story in your head and write down what happens and publish it. And it's not as easy as all that. And it took me a long time to learn that. So when it came to writing a novel, this was the first novel that I ever wrote, and it has the rare distinction. I published it in 2011 on Amazon Kindle, and until 4 or 5 years later, until I started like being somebody on YouTube, it never sold a single copy. And a lot of authors, when they're like, I want to tell a story, and you publish a book and they put it on Amazon, they run into the same problem that they don't sell very many copies or any copies of their book. And that's because there's much more to writing books and being a writer than just like, yeah, there's a lot more to it. In fact, there are 5 things to it. And maybe that's the point that I'm trying to make. The first point that I'm trying to make, I don't want this video to go on forever, but I want to make more videos about writing. And the first thing I want to say is, if I could go back in time with what I know now to what I knew then, I'd say, listen, bruv, okay, you think you have the story in your head that you want to tell to people, and you wrote down what the story was, and you give it to people, and maybe they'll read it. And the people who have read it, they're like, oh, that's fine, and it's fine. But the problem is, this is a very simplistic and amateurish attempt at what you're doing. And that's because we, as human beings, especially as like educated Westerners, we think writing is easy because we write every day. We write emails every day. We write text messages. We write blog posts. We write this and that. And we think writing is easy. Yeah. But writing a story is a lot more complex than that. Writing is a craft. I think a lot of people, they either think writing is super easy, or else they think writing a book is like some kind of mystical art, and it's not. It's a craft. What you do as a writer is you have this amazing opportunity to be able to come up with stories in your head. Yeah, like, I don't know, some ginger kid going to Paris and getting involved in wild adventures and falling in love with an American girl. You come up with this adventure in your head, in your imagination. You're like, wow, this is great. And then you want to tell it to people. And the reason you want to tell it to people is because it makes you feel an emotion. That's what storytelling is. It makes you feel an emotion. So I read this story, and it was kind of like wish fulfillment of, if I went and worked at the American University of Paris and worked in Paris for a lot of times and fell in love with American girls, and had adventures that weren't quite as exciting as these ones. But yeah, I have felt emotions in this story, emotions of like excitement and danger and romance and stuff. And so I wanted to take this story that I had, this thing in my imagination, and download it and put it onto a page, and use the English language to the point that any random stranger could pick up this book, read it and experience the same journey and feel the same emotions that I felt when I wrote it. That's what writing is. That's what writing a story is you download this thing that makes you feel an emotion onto the page, and you use your knowledge of the English language for someone else to read it and then feel that same emotion. And in order to do that, takes far more than just sitting down and writing what happened. There's a lot more to it if you want to be successful at writing. And I think I want to make some videos about what those things are. And so I'm running out of batteries on this phone right now. So I'm actually going to wrap this video up right now. But yes, stay tuned. I'm going to make videos about writing because that's something I feel passionate about. And at least it's not politics. And if you want to support me in this wild endeavor, then buy me a pint or buy a copy of my book. Instead, click on that link down below and hopefully you'll enjoy it, and I'll make more videos soon. Ciao.